je vais vous présenter
I'd like to
Elia
introduce
seul.
Elia,
Il nous avait
who's
laissé
here
avec,
all by himself.
Il reste en 2009 et nous le retrouvons aujourd'hui.
We saw him in
Producteur,
2009,
scénariste, acteur,
and here he is as a
réalisateur
producer,
de
scriptwriter,
ce film, It Must Be Heaven, mais il est
actor
venu
in the film
accompagné
It Must Be Heaven. But he
des,
did come
des
accompanied
producteurs, notamment,
by his
donc nous avons
producers.
avec
In
nous au
particular, we
premier
have
rang
with us
Anaïssa et
Anaïssa and Fatma
Al-Remaimi
Al-Remaimi,
qui sont les
who
producteurs
are
exécutifs
the
qui doivent
executive
musiquer.
producers,
Puis Zeynep
And Zeynep,
Ospatou-Ratakan, qui est coproductrice,
who is co-producer, Serge Noël, producer, Anatis Karatanos, also a producer, Laurine Pelassi and Edouard Veil, producers, and Yasmine Amtan,
consultante de la musique sur le
who
film.
is a consultant on the music in the film.
So I don't know how, but the first question for me, and then I'll let them ask questions. I don't know how you came up with this title, but something I remembered yesterday was that I was once said this sentence, "It must be heaven," in a poetry festival. Somebody told me heaven must be a place where people get together to share poetry. And I wondered last night if this communion that we could feel in the theater of these people sharing your poetry was like heaven, at least for a moment for you.
What's really terrible is that I have to pretend that I'm intelligent at this hour of the day.
I'm sure you'll get by.
And I should measure my pulse for anxiety and all that. But the fact is, they changed the order of things. So the press conference the day after, meaning like when you party till 5 o'clock in the morning, the only thing you want to imagine that you talk as you are asleep. So, okay, I'll pull myself together.
Just before the party, how did you feel?
I mean, It Must Be Heaven it has some element of irony as well. I think from pronouncing this title, you understand that there's no happy ending to this title. But there is also a core relationship between me and the title. And that is that in real terms, I've been looking for so many years of that dream place where one would settle in and not depart from. And so far, for the past many decades, it's been redepartures and a kind of postponed return. Not that this has not the benefits by itself, because I think perversely or paradoxically speaking, I think exilic experience carries with it quite a lot of pleasures and maturing process, and the multiplicity of looking at situations from various angles and not in a linear way as when we are in one place. Therefore, the identification and the imagining of yourself as other cultures and other people, and putting yourself in the skin of people under certain injustices becomes a lot more viable. So It Must Be Heaven, in a way, is this constant shifting that can also have its double-edged meaning. One is, well, it's true that many times there is a certain amount of fatigue on my part, I'll speak, that somehow there is a little frustration, or rather disillusionment from that potentiality of finding heaven. But on the other hand, the reason why I'm here is also a privilege and a benefit from the fact that I lead this exilic experience. So does that answer the question?
It does perfectly.
Okay, gun one. Let's hope the next one is as intelligent. Okay.
Bonjour, messieurs.
Good morning. My name is Marion Goetz, and I represent an internet TV channel.
My
question is the following. Do you think that one can find one's own place
lieu d'origine ici dans ce monde avec son
here
propre
in
corps?
this world
Merci bien pour répondre, monsieur.
as a being?
With your own body.
Here, where?
You're here in this world, in your own body.
Is it a sort of religious question? What, I don't understand the question very well. You mean, will I ever find a home in this world? Well, I kind of in very convoluted words, I just answered this question in a way. I mean, I think somehow you end up only living in the concept that you have created for yourself. In my case, I might have a little house and a nice garden in the films that I make. But then there are very, fiber, foldable materials. So when I finish a film, I kind of pack and go on with a kind of nomadic existence. I have to say that it's not a physical, geographic experience only that one is talking about. I think there's a lot of people in the world who are living in one place and do have that house and that garden, but who are living a certain exilic experience in their own homeland. I can name quite a few peoples who are, having this experience, and quite a lot of individuals actually who keep wondering about whether they are in a centered place and whether this centered place and position is not questionable by itself. So people who live in one place can be also nomadic in a certain spiritual way.
Congratulations for your beautiful movie. I just wanted to ask you something about the city that you choose, New York, and how did you also work in? How did you discover the city? How did you find the locations? And if you developed the script. Watching at the life of the city. Thank you.
Did anybody pay you to do this? Can the questions be simpler every once in a while in my life? Okay, I'll answer the last part. I hope to forget the first. No, I don't work exactly like, I travel to places and then I research them. Some of the notes that have been scratched in notebooks that have been metamorphosed into aestheticized dimensions in this film are maybe 20 years old. I have just many notebooks and I simply go around with a small pen and notebook and try, I'd say, to be alert, but not with intention, which is very important to put in between brackets. There's no intention of making a film when you are in a wandering situation. So you just sit and you daydream, or you sit and you observe the animation around you, and you take it as a way of life and not as a way to make films. Partially because a lot of the observations, or not necessarily just exterior observations, but sometimes interior voyages take you into some sort of self-evaluation and self-questioning as to how you want to better your life and better the life of others near you or around you and elsewhere. So it's a way of living, actually. A way of constantly putting in doubt all the all the wisdom that you think you have accumulated during your maturing years, and always a re-evaluation of some sort. So what happens then is, at some point, of course, every once in a while, I remember that I'm a filmmaker, and I think that cinema is something nearby, and I start to feel a kind of weight of a kind of, I'm talking about a metaphysical weight or a metaphorical weight, something that is asking to be looked at and asking to be expressed, asking to be imagined. And so there is this kind of then moving in and out of attempts to write something that could resemble a script. That takes years. And because I cook a lot, so I prefer cooking, of course. And then there's something that goes on in the world. You're trying to sponge its vibration, something that comes at you, or somehow becomes an ambience, that is asking for this writing to become, more images. And in other words, I only make the film when I feel it's necessary to be made. That means it has to correspond to the ambience of the world that we live in today. Then I start to become less lazy and start to write and function faster. And let's say, sense the urgency that this particular work now has to be said, because the situation in the world or in the place becomes really in urgent need to, not for me to save the world evidently, but to somehow share what it is that some of us might in solitary ways feel, but not exactly share, not exactly communicate. So it becomes a need for me to actually, come out with a work that can maybe start the questioning and start the sharing and start the communication. Did I answer the question?
Good morning, and thank you, Frédéric Ponsard for Euronews TV.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Suleiman, for this love letter to Palestine, as hilarious as tragic in a way. I would like to know if you believe in cards and in tarots in particular, because there is this wonderful scene, and with this guy who said that you won't know Palestine, state of Palestine, of your living. Are you that pessimistic for Palestine? Thank you.
If I am pessimistic for Palestine, it's as much pessimism for, where do you come from, you said? For France too. I even sometimes think more for France these days. Anyway, first of all, it's not about believing or not believing, I mean, I have faith, but not in cards, but more in a kind of spiritual existence that asks for some kind of cosmic relationship between people, and animals too, as you saw in my film. I knew this man who was a card reader in New York, who was a friend, and he passed away now. And it was mesmerizing, what he could tell, in his card reading. One thing that we had not in common at all is that he's never seen a film in his life because he was born blind. But that added a lot of benefits in some respect, because he had a lot of imagination for what cinema can be, and he was asking sometimes for, technical information even. So, and every once in a while I would ask him to read, for amusement, basically. And then at this moment in 1997, I think, I started to have this very simplistic notion that I want to make a film in more than one country, simply because I have gathered not very many, but quite a few notebooks of countries that I have visited. There are many. And so I recorded a session with him on video. And for fun and play, I asked him, will there be Palestine? I don't remember what he answered, to be honest, because in the script it's just me who added that sentence. But I asked him, for example, where I would end up living. And he gave me a description and a place, a very precise place. Yes, I cannot talk about it in public. And it was the initiation of this idea back then, without any understanding or comprehension of what I wanted to do, you know, so many years later, which is the film. But it had already initiated some kind of sensation. Of course, at this moment, it lacked, you know, another 100 notebooks and a lot of years to be lived and to have an experience observed, because this is the way I work. And but it was an interesting thing that I recorded it, because I discovered this when I looked at this at these images not long time ago, because I was writing the script and I thought maybe I should look at this material I shot. And I discovered that I said to this blind card reader that I want to one day, I said, to make a film in different parts of the world. I don't know, I said, what this film is about, but it's just an idea. I lost myself about, you said something about pessimism. Okay. You know, I think just like you and just like me and just like so many people, we are in and out of disillusionment and in and out of a lot of inspiration and hope. But by de facto, when you make a film, the act of making the film is only a response to your question. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Suleiman, before anything, thank you for the film, and please don't take another 10 years to make the next one. We can't wait.
I have my family here, watch out.
And just two very quick questions. One is about Jacques Tati is such an important dialogue with your films, and how was it shooting in France with this Monsieur Suleiman instead of Monsieur Hulot going about Paris? Was that something that came to your mind? And if you could speak a little longer about the first scene, because it's the only scene in the film, as far as I could tell, that it's not being either watched or played by your character in relation to the religious scene. Why was it important, and why was it decisive to have it as an opening scene?
I'll start with this one, because it's much easier. I enjoy the playfulness of initiating with this sort of B-movie element scene. So I'm always delighted when I find a scene that has absolutely no connection to the rest of the film, but it has some kind of punchline, and it has some kind of rhythm, and it has also a little surprise for the spectator. You know, we see a ritual, we see a Greek Orthodox bishop, and we think this guy from Nazareth is like, of course, he's coming with his religious baggage, being, you know, having been the neighbor of Jesus and all that. So I like to play with that. The rest is really just that. And the fact that the title is It Must Be Heaven, I thought, again, maybe a little playfulness on that part, that people will think that, of course, this is starting with a ceremony, it's called It Must Be Heaven, that means there's some kind of religious connotation. You know, my previous film, one was called Divine Intervention, and similarly, also it starts with a Santa Claus that gets stabbed by some teenagers for nothing, just for fun. And you never see nothing developing in terms of narrative structure for this. So B-movie is fascinating for that. Then I stop and I start the film. It's like a bit like when the first two, three chords of an orchestra, you know. I don't know about Tati. I'm in total adoration of Tati. I was never inspired by Tati, and I say it with a very pompous, you know, way, as to tell you, no, it's me, it's not him, etc. I don't want to give him any credits, in other words. He has already enough. I do think he's maybe one of my favorite, not only, I've watched his films now in segments. I do this with books as well. I just go back to watch a scene or two, zap and finish. And also because I don't have really a lot of patience to watch cinema, so I find him, amazing. But I think my inspirations come from unexpected places. Sometimes nothing to do even with the similarity in style at all. Sometimes yes. I do. When I watch a Roy Andersson film, I can tell you that I'm filled with joy. But also when I watch that Tsai Ming Liang film, I think this is one of my favorite filmmakers. But we're not exactly close. But I also read a book by Primo Levi, and it inspires me to write a scene that has nothing to do with Primo Levi. So there is no real inspiration of one source coming your way. I think it's really what is magical, actually, is that it's not pointed where you come from. Evidently, you come from a multiplicity of origins, and evidently from experiencing life and from all those people who somehow gave you pleasures of reading, or the pleasures of watching, or let's say, somehow infused more spaces in your poetic existence.
Hi, I'm Song, KBS from South Korea. Thank you for your amazing film.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, I think, about also prejudice, and you observe. So it's very universal problem, I think. So tell me, how does it relate with your screening composition, especially symmetric screen, your own symmetric screen? Thank you.
What does a symmetric screen mean?
Your screen is very intensely symmetric, left and right.
I think he meant
The frame?
Yeah, yeah.
And now I understand this part. Now repeat the question.
So your meaning and relation between your meaning and your
okay.
frame, your
Okay.
frame, yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. But I'm sorry. I forgot the first part. So
prejudice.
why prejudice? No, I think there's an absolute there's a very metaphysical relationship between what you open to in terms of an image and the meaning that it contains. And I, for myself, I, for example, try very hard to make an open frame that starts to have multiple pigmentations in order so that the meaning becomes less linear, and so that you can view the same image twice and see it, well, not only twice, but even not in seeing it. I also always have this pompous ambition that when people see an image that they appreciate and enjoy, and that they can watch it again without going to see the actual film, that means it starts to have a visual repercussion of some sort, that it starts to have an infinite form of metamorphosis that can sometimes also turn into some things that are physical and material. So I like to enjoy and fathom the idea that, a beautiful image or an appreciated image or a constrained frame is traveling somewhere, but is carrying its own, ways of exposing itself that is not even necessarily visual, and that can also become a mode of one moment in your life that can have maybe something to do with tenderness and maybe love, for example. So this requires a lot of precision. To hope for so much eventually means you need to be a very obsessive filmmaker. So many times where the camera stands really makes the crew get so bored from waiting because of 1 centimeter to the left, 1 centimeter to the right, and putting all the lenses and putting them again, and getting frustrated and sweating it out and all of that. So for me, it's the quest for what I just said that has absolute correlation and connection with what this image is supposed to transpire.
My name is Vanessa. I'm from Hong Kong. I want to follow what you just said. I think it's very important you have this professionalism in you, because film is forever, and no matter how many years later we got to see it, and if you blame yourself, you didn't do it perfectly the way you want. My question for you is, a while ago, I met a girl in Dubai in a party. She is all dressed up, beautiful, glamorous. But the moment we start to talk about Palestine and the Palestinian, the stories, her face changed, her tone changed. That is like, she's the second generation, but she's telling me how much they were scarred and suffered. So, and she told me many, many stories about the Palestinian around the world. And I want to ask you, is there a special message that you want to pass it to them, especially you say right now, there's an urgency, we need to do this movie?
I think the urgency to make the movies is not an urgency to do with Palestine per se. I mean, actually, just the contrary. I think, the fact that the whole issue of Palestine became so worldly that it becomes now an urgency. It Must Be Heaven is about the Palestinianization of the globe. And I think this is what now is the red or the alarm ringing. And this is why the character moves from one place, to another, and finds that there is states of exception and reigning violence and police states where he goes. So I don't know how to point only my wisdom from the film's message to just one case or just one people. I think the whole idea of this film is the elasticity of the tragic situation that the Palestinians have been living for over 70 years. And that it's just, expanding, in all direction. I guess that's answers a little bit of what I'm talking about now. I have to just add to it that sentiment has nothing to do with this last sentence, because when I made this film, this is a personal statement for you. I thought for the past couple of decades that I have achieved this kind of equal identification with the rest of the world. I may have failed slightly because due to the intense familiarity with one place that makes a little imbalance with the rest of the affiliation and identification with the rest of the places, and that is Palestine. And so when I was shooting the film, I remember when I shot the first part, which was actually in Nazareth and around, it dawned on me that I thought that I've gotten rid of this kind of roots business, but I discovered as I left for the second shoot that I was in quite a melancholic and sentimental mood. some of my unwanted, undesired nationalism came to haunt me back with its pleasures and its, also undesired consequences.
Hoda Brahim, France Média Monde.
Bravo,
Elia. Ma question, c'est
I have a question about your film. Maybe it's the most silent film that you've made.
Alors, est-ce que
So,
quelle valeur le silence représente pour vous?
what does silence represent for you? Does silence help you to have more fun with the images, to find more images that are very evocative in terms of the raw material of your film?
I'm not so sure, but you might be right that this is the most silent. I don't really know, because my films are so silent that I can't figure out which is more silent. As they have all a lot of sound as well, and so when we say silent, we assume also maybe that there is it is little dialogue. I think since I think just things fall in place that way when you start to make your first images. I mean, I don't know how it all kind of fell as such. Why did I make, for example, my first short film with my character in front of the camera and also silent? How come, it didn't go in another way where I'm blabbing, somehow, some words. I didn't say that. You said that. You go and write your own script. But I'm actually what I'm trying to do now and waste everybody's time is to evaluate whether, if theoretically this film is more silent, if it has something to do with the nature and content of the film. In other words, there might be an interesting answer to that one. Or is it that you perceived it as such, but it doesn't change the situation? That means it's the nature and the content of the film that felt as if it is more silent. There's a chance to all of that. But I think, other than it becoming your language somehow, other than also the fact that silence somehow can never become an institutionalized form of expression, because every time you actually start to infuse silence in an image, it's you, the maker, the writer, who is at risk to begin with. So I don't think there is ever, a way where silence is just comfort. And also the fact my person, taking this risk probably has something to do with something quite very political. The fact is, I always have the faith that silence is a very destabilizing factor to the dominant order. Power and authority don't like silence. They prefer noise. And because they prefer time passing in a horizontal way and not in a vertical fashion. So when I'm talking about how they impose on you the order of the day, and how they can make the noise make you feel that the time has passed and that you suddenly wake up to yourself and say, how did I come to this? Due to the multinationals and due to the profit-making monsters and due to fascist governments that now have become, it became a la mode to be fascist. So silence is a form of resistance in so many ways, but I don't use it strategically. It just comes to me intuitively. It just asks for itself to be there. And it asks of me to take a leap in that silence as well. So what's really interesting is the pleasure that you have from this coming to this place where it's a vulnerable space, where the chances of you, falling into traps requires so much alertness. And but the fact that also what you take out of it is so much that you go there because of this intense pleasure of the meditative moment. So. And I can speak about silence a long time, but imagine to speak about silence. So I might as well end this.
Thanks for this film. And my question is actually, I noticed you made an dedication to Mr. John Berger in the last sequences. So I'm wondering, is his work like sort of inspire you to make this film? Because you sort of made the audience into observers to observe actually your observation. Yeah.
I think it's something quite very personal, John Berger. It's I may have been guided by John Berger. He was a bit of a guardian angel, and he never really told me to make films, but he kind of spiritually, poetically opened some spaces where I could start to wonder if this is something I want to do or in the way I want to do it. It was a very personal relationship with John Berger, so we were like family, and from very, very long time ago when I was very young. So we met accidentally. And then he started to kind of become a bit of a mentor, protector, guide, etc., without doing very much, by the way. His presence was already enough. His one questioning of some situation was already enough. So our first brief encounters were just an amazing inspiration for me, regardless of the fact of whether we actually said something or if we actually just consumed a lot of alcohol, which was mostly that. But there was something joyful and inspiring. And so then it developed into some mature kind of relationship. And he started to read my scripts and give me his text before they're published, etc. And then it became a family situation. So I read a lot of his work. He would give me all of his books in this very beautiful, casual way that it just made me run to open the book and read it and quite understand very little of it and read it again, but felt a certain amount of magical poetry coming out of it. So it's very inspiring in that sense. I actually was inspired by a lot of literature that I did not understand. I comprehended quite very little of it, but it just kind of put me in a state where I was, energetic, vibrant, and felt like I could do the same. But there's always a start,
Dernière question.
Okay, hello. My name is Ayako Ishizu from Japan, and thank you for the beautiful, beautiful film. I love it. And in the last film, the time that remains. So your character's mother, and your mother was a big presence in that film. But this time we see your mother isn't here anymore, and her departure gives you the big emotional, how do I say it? When you're writing this film, so maybe it gives you the big inspiration and those things. And would you give me the comment about that? And also, I have one more question. And the Japanese couple and Little Bird, are they real actors and actresses? That's my question. Thank you.
If they were, the bird was a professional actor. The Japanese, no. Yes, they are actors actually. The Japanese couple, yes, and very good ones too. And they were very kind and very nice. And yeah, I love that scene. Self-mocking is a pleasure. I think I dedicated also the film with John Berger and Humbert Balzan and my mother and my father, because all of them have been, or I am in total appreciation and gratification, because all of them put me where I am. Not to say that I'm so comfortable where I am, but they opened a lot of paths. My parents were just an amazingly great, loving, tender, giving, funny, extremely funny. So the music is from my father. It's like I can tell you a lot of things where the Lego in front of you here is composed from what elements from there, and also I have very funny family, who were. I'm talking about also my brothers and sisters, etc. And I think that maybe the humor that's coming into my film, of course, is coming from this nucleus, evidently. Even some scenes that are in some of my films are simply scenes that one member of my family would come and tell me, because they started to know what kind of anecdotes I'll be looking for, and they would come with a story, tell me, look, we have a story for the film for you, etc. And some of them came actually into my films. And Humbert Balzan, because I think he was, for me, the person who really opened for me my cinematic presence. And without him, I don't think I would be, doing what I'm doing. He was like maybe the best ever cheerleader that could have been in the world of cinema. So my love and sadness for his passing is also there, just like my parents too. And John Berger, who just passed away not long time ago, was equally, a mentor. So that's why there's the dedication.
Thank you very much, Elia, for opening up so much.
Thank you.
And thank you. Merci à tous.